Hey guys, welcome back in. Hope you're all having a fantastic day. In today's video, we got a little bit of a throwback from the past. So one of the biggest surprises from week 1 of stage 5, the New York home series, was not only that New York went 0-2 during their home series, but I thought Optic was really impressive in that Sunday matchup against New York, and they beat them in hardpoint, which as of late is by far New York's best game mode. So I figured, you know what, a little bit of a blast from the past. Let's go ahead and let's do a map analysis. So without further ado, let's go ahead and let's head on over to this map 1 Moscow hardpoint between Chicago and New York. We're going to go through, we're going to break it down. I'm going to show you all the key moments, plays, bring up the mini map, show you exactly what had happened, so that we can get a better understanding of everything that went about throughout this match. So as we're keyed in right here, we are inside of P1. Biggest thing to take as of note right now is just the fact that if you look at the mini map in the bottom left-hand corner, you can see those yellow arrows on the right-hand side of the map, and that's all you want to do, right? So every tick of this contested time inside of P1 for New York is perfect, because you don't really care about gaining time inside of P1. You just don't really want your enemies to get time inside of P1, and you don't want them to overtake your spawns. So at the end of this first hill, it's about to be a tie ball game, but you kept spawns as long as you get the vast majority of the time inside of this P2, then it's a successful start to the map. And as you can see right now, if we look in the bottom left, I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to bring up the map for the very first time, because I want to make sure that we're explaining exactly what is happening here with the setup from NYSL. So biggest thing is they have their ARs in really advantageous positions, okay? So there are 2 lanes you have to watch. You have to watch the push through this bottom street, and right here is where Mac is. So you have an AR with a long line of sight watching this bottom street, and then you have Clayster up here on this heady watching the push through mid. And again, you can have Clayster here. You could also have him up in this top window. We see this a lot, but sometimes if you're in that top window, it can be tough to finish those kills before they get behind certain cover, like where Clay is at right now. So this is a perfect setup in terms of where Clay is at and where Mac is at. And then they take both their SMGs. They have one SMG sitting up here to combat the push through lobby, and they have another SMG roaming around this bottom area, this B bomb site in S&D, just to combat any pushes through here. So the setup right now is perfect if you're talking about NYSL. And let's go ahead, let's watch this play out. We can see that Scump is in this B bomb site room, but 2 have already died as they tried to push through the bottom section of the map. Right there, Hydra and Asim both get kills. Even right there, so 3 go down. Dashy gets a 2-piece, Scump gets 1, but because their setup was so good, they're still able to maintain those back spawns. But if you're talking from an Optic point of view, this is also a win, because you were able to get the majority of the time inside of P1. You were able to leave there with it essentially being tied, and NYSL had spawns for P2. And at the end of P2, you really only gave up like 30 seconds. So in a possible 60 seconds, you have to break their spawn. You have to try to push through rather than try to flip the map with 20 seconds left. All Optic did was just try to not let them inside of P2. And you can see that now they're set up for P3 and they're getting ready to capitalize. Now, one other thing that I want to point out is that as we look at the mini map in the bottom left, I don't know if they watched my video. They probably did not watch my video, but this setup is 1,000 times better than how they were set up. I just did a breakdown video probably 3 or 4 weeks ago and what's going on with Optic, and their setups just weren't great. And from this point of view, you can see things are a lot better. So as we go through and bring this up again, let's set up where they're at inside of P3. So obviously P3 is over here. They do have Formal inside the hard point, and he's watching this choke point over by Top Eskies. Perfectly set up before they had Envoy pushed up into this corner, and that's 2 people watching the same line of sight. You just don't need him there. So I like where Formal is at. Their other AR, they have Dashy all the way in the back, and this is where you want him to be, so that even if every single person inside P3 dies, you still have this presence in the back over here, and you can still regain at least one more full set of spawns before having to worry about getting flipped out here. And then if you're talking about their SMGs, they have Envoy right here for support, and they have Scump pushed up here. So Envoy can either help Scump in this direction or help Dashy in the back. Scump is obviously watching the push through mid right here, and Formal, as we talked about, is watching the push through Eskies. So this is much better how they're set up now than how they were set up before. And just in case you missed that video, Envoy was here, we're talking about before, in their matchup with Dallas. Formal was here, Scump was here, and Dashy was here. So in a way, you still kind of had all of the routes covered, but the issue was that if anybody at all pushes through gold and gets to this location right here and gets this kill, now you no longer have a presence back here maintaining these back spawns. You get flipped out, and now all of a sudden you lose whatever presence you had for P3, and you give up the majority of the rest of that time. So as we go back and press play, you can see that this is just a much better setup. So Formal's just watching the front. I really like this line of sight that he's got here. He's able to put a couple bullets into Hydra, and the push is going to come through right here. Scump's able to get the first. He does get traded, but Envoy's there, Dashy's there, and still, with all of these people that went down, you can see that the last person standing was Dashy. He was able to get that kill in the back, and since he got that kill in the back, now Optic regained those back spawns. New York is spawning at top Eskies, and now the rest of this time is going to go to Optic. So a much better setup. It allows them to leave P3 with a lead starting from the bad side of the map, which they were not able to do the last time we went through and broke down one of these maps. Here you can see that NYSL is just trying to cut off any reserves that might be pushing over towards that P4 area of the map. So this initial time inside of P4, as it should, is going to be good for NYSL. And now if you are Optic, you're trying to push through and break this and just try to get whatever time you can inside of P4. Trying to flip here can be a little bit difficult, but if you just try to overwhelm the point, which they did just now, Formal gets that last kill. They're getting these back spawns, and now they're muddying up this time inside of P4, and this is exactly what you want. In that push through mid-map, there was a point where Mac got this pinched spawn, which is going to allow them to push forward and contest for just a second. But Optic's able to weather the storm. They're back inside the hill, and this is just perfectly done inside of P4. So let's just pause this one more time. Let's bring up the minimap and show you just exactly what teams are trying to do right here. So as Optic left P3, you want to make sure that you're hitting P4 from multiple angles. So you come through, you hit it from the back, you send one or two through elbow. You could also send one through gold. And at the end of P3, we saw Dashy push all the way through Eskies, get to this side of P1, and he was able to get a kill right here in this area of the map as his teammates pushed forward and got kills here. And essentially what that does is that takes NYSL, that continues to spawn them further out over here. And that's how, even though it wasn't a clean team wipe, it was kind of like a staggered team wipe, Optic was still able to get that time inside of P4. You go ahead, you spawn NYSL out, but the job is not over, because towards the end of P4, there's 15 seconds left where we're at right now in the film. If you're NYSL, you're still set up. So you're only down by about 20 points, but you're still set up for rotations over towards P2. So the job is not done. If you're Optic, you still are looking to push through mid or push over towards top Eskies to get those back spawns. But first things first, let's see how they continue inside of P4 and eventually into P1. We are in a listen in here, which is why the screen's a little bit messed up, but it's no big deal. So last 10 seconds or so, nobody really got inside of P4. If you're NYSL, that is a win. P1 has popped, and you're getting this initial time inside of P1. And then you also have those back right spawns for P2. So right now, everything is perfect. The only thing that's different is if you look at this number 3 arrow, I'm going to do my best, just try to explain it right here. Normally, I have another scene where I bring up the minimap, but since it's in a listen in, you can't really bring it up. The only thing that's different here is that this is Mac, and he's pushed up inside this B bomb room rather than being back here. So if he's back here, that doubles holding down those spawns and watching that bottom route. And this is going to come through to hurt them here in a bit. So we'll let this play out, but you can just see how the presence on that side of the map isn't quite there like it was before. There's still 35 seconds left inside this P1 hardpoint, and if you're Optic, you're soaking up all of this time. If you're NYSL, this isn't great. Of course, you do want to make sure, number one, you hold down those spawns, but if you give up 40 seconds inside of P1, that basically counters whatever you might potentially get inside of P2. And if you get flipped, now you're giving up the 40 seconds inside of P1 while also giving up that time inside of P2. So it's not the best case scenario. But again, if we look at the minimap, you can see, remember, we just talked about this. Right here is this arrow for Mac. So Mac is right here. And since he's there, he can only watch this direction. Whereas before, he was down here and he could watch the entire push and he was able to get kills in this area of the map. Now he's not there. And because of that, that has allowed Optic, and they don't have an SMG watching this bomb room right here. So they've allowed 2 Optic players to get inside this bomb room. Both of their SMGs are inside this bomb room, and you have Formal pushing up the bottom side of the map. So if you're NYSL, sure, you're covering the push through top Eskies right here with Clay, but you have nobody watching that bottom push. So anytime there's a kill on any of these people, now that they're pushed up on the bottom, that's going to take NYSL, that's going to spawn them out, and now they have all of this range to try to recover. So little bit of a different setup here. And right there, Envoy gets a kill on Max. Scump also gets a kill. Formal gets a kill. And now they have control of this back area of the map. They're spawning over towards top Eskies like we talked about. And this is basically worst case scenario. Remember, we said if you're NYSL, sure, that's great to hold down P2. But if you give up all that time inside of P1, and for some reason you get flipped out, now you're giving up 100 points. And Scump is here towards the middle of the map. He and Formal are both getting kills. And if you're NYSL, this is a disaster. That's why you go from basically at the end of the first set of rotations having a tie ball game to the last 25 seconds here for Optic are going to end up adding to their tally, and they're going to have over a 100-point lead. And it really just happened because there's 2 money hills on this map, P2 and P3, and they chained together essentially P3. They contested P4. They got time inside of P1, and they got basically all of P2. So the last 4 hills for Optic have all gone their way, and that's why for NYSL, you can see that things are starting to slide a bit. Here comes the push from Optic over towards P3. They're pinched over towards elbow. That is probably not going to end up working out. You have Envoy and you have Formal pushing up the back. Envoy's able to get a kill on a scene, but here come the reserves. Clayster's able to trade that kill. Envoy comes in through the back. He gets dealt with. So far, so good for NYSL. You have the last man standing over towards P3 and Clay. You were able to essentially maintain those back spawns, and now with 20 seconds left, even though there is a push coming in, so you're giving up the last 15 seconds, but you held it for the majority of that time, and now you're in location and you're set up for a push through P4. But this is a lot of what we've seen from Optic. Envoy gets an entry kill, Dashy gets an entry kill, and now all of a sudden that bottom part of the map is open. So even though NYSL is here to get that first time inside of P4, they're not set up all the way. Optic is able to push through, and that's what we've seen. In this match specifically, a lot of those entry kills really didn't go the way of Optic before, and they're starting to go their way now. So they've done a nice job of making sure they're set up in those initial P3 and having those back spawns over towards P2. They were able to flip. Now they're just slaying out Formal with a 2-piece. Clay is able to trade a couple, but Dashy gets that. So the last 20 seconds, if you're Optic, this is going to take you very close to winning this map. Asim gets a fortunate kill there where they're able to execute a pinch. But if you're Optic, you now only need 22 points. So even if you give up the next 60 points inside of P1 and somehow they chain 50 points inside of P2, they're still not in the situation to win. So if you're Optic, this is set up perfectly. Asim executes a really nice flank right here, but what that does is it takes Optic and it gives them those back right spawns. So I just want to show this again real quick. If you're NYSL, everything is set up perfectly. You're happy. You have one person over towards top Eskies watching the push here. You have two inside this current hard point just watching the push, watching the flank. But Clay is set up here. And he's there instead of back over towards P2. And essentially what happens, this is Asim. So Asim runs through gold, and he's able to flank from behind and get a 2-piece here. But since Clay is pushed up over towards this half wall, and he's not at P2, since Asim is pushed up, that's going to block this side spawn for Optic. That's going to give them this back spawn. So essentially, it's a great flank. It's going to guarantee you a few more seconds inside of P1, but you're doing that at the expense of potentially giving up those back right spawns for P2. So as we come back on board here, Clay knows that somebody's there. And here in just a second, so down in the bottom left-hand corner, Mac just came up off of spawn right here. So if you're Clay and your teammate is spawning all the way out on the other side of the map, somebody is somewhere in the back behind you. So it's just good situational game awareness overall out of Clay. He's able to get that kill on Scump, and he immediately turns around. The reason why Clay is looking backwards is because Mac called out that he got that weird spawn. He doesn't win that gun battle overall, but because things are so contested, NYSL does still get that back spawn. And as you're watching this, you just have to always be aware like where people are spawning, where they're coming up off of spawn, because if you're Optic, you know right now that they still have those right side of the map spawns. If you're NYSL, you have to contest for just a second. Hydra does a nice job right here of just laying inside the hard point. That makes it and forces another rotation over towards P2. And here over the next hill, NYSL is going to get some decent time. Envoy invests his streak, which clears out the actual hill. Mac's able to get that kill on Formal and then sneak back into the hard point. So a lot of times you call that streak and NYSL has to clear off that hill because they know that's where the streak is going to be. And normally when you clear off that hill, there's going to be Optic players waiting for you, so they're going to end up finishing those kills. It didn't actually work out that way. So if you're Optic, sure, you gave up time inside of P1. You're giving up all this time inside of P2. Like we talked about how that could get NYSL close, but they would have to play perfect hard point in P1, hold for P2, and also clear out for P3. And as you're going to see here, Optic is set up. Scump's able to get one. Mac does trade him, but he gets traded by Formal. And at this point in time, if you're Clay, you're the only person left that can make a difference. Envoy gets the kill on Clay. And as the last couple seconds come off the board, Optic's able to secure that map 1 victory, which led into a S&D map 2 victory. They also won the control. It was just an absolute wipe. So I think this series overall, a lot of it had to do with New York not playing up to their potential like they did earlier on in Stage 4 and before Asim wasn't able to travel for the Stage 4 major. But Optic also played that Moscow hardpoint much better. They were set up over towards P3 much better. They pushed and they were able to break to P2 much better. So overall, just a better overall performance from Optic, and they're able to get the win over NYSL. So if you guys are new around here, you enjoy this sort of content, make sure you go ahead, hit that subscribe button, leave a like if you don't mind, as it really helps out the channel. And with that, thank you guys so much. We will see you in the next upload.